Okay. Um, First of all, thank you so much for having me here. Gemma, we met there a couple of weeks ago and Gemma had asked me to come and give a presentation to you all on see how to pull together a CV, a competitive CV. So thank you for having me and asking me. I'm really happy to be here with you all. I can see some of the names on the screen and I recognize some of them through the CV workshop that we did with the pharmacy students. So nice to see you all here. I hope you're all keeping well. So I mean, there's not too many of us here. So what I would say is this presentation is probably going to take maybe half an hour to talk through. If you have any questions at any time, because there's not too many of us, please feel free just to turn on your microphones and ask. And if you want to turn on your cameras, you're very welcome to do so too. But I'll talk through this. If you'd rather keep the questions to the end, that's absolutely fine also, or you can put them in the chat. We will have, I will have sample CVs ready for you. So you can either email me directly or Gemma will also have them. I think she's going to put them up on the Kuwait Medical Science website, so you can have access to them there. So let's get started on this anyway today. Okay, so really, what I'm hoping that you're all going to get out of today is what is the purpose of your CV. Again, I'm conscious that there's a mix of different levels in the room here today. I know that we've got some medicine students, we've got some pharmacy students, I hope we have some physio students also, and that you're at different levels and different times of your journey here with RCSI. So this is quite broad what we're going to talk about today, but perhaps, you know, if you'd like to make a one-to-one appointment with me after, that's fine. And we might be able to tailor something specific depending on what it is that you need. But from today, what I'm hoping that you will all have a greater understanding of is what is the purpose of your CV, understanding what it is that employers, whether it's here, whether it's back home in Kuwait, whatever it is, what is it that they want to see on your CV? How to market yourself on your CV. This is something that's challenging for us all. I think we can sometimes not be so confident. Sometimes it can be a cultural thing. It can be a certain, whatever stage we're at in our career, but it can be difficult to market ourselves on our CV. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Then around the practical elements of a CV and the structure and the format. So how to lay it out and what type of formatting to use, and then just very briefly around a cover letter and what that is and how to write an effective cover letter. So look, very briefly, I mean, what is the purpose of your CV? So really what a CV is to see, well, will you do a job? So whatever it is you're using this CV for, what somebody reading it wants to understand is, will you do whatever it is you say you're going to do? Can you do it? So do you have the correct academic background? Do you have the right education so that you can actually do the job? And then adding onto all of that, are you going to fit into the company? So whether that's in a hospital setting, a pharmacy setting, you know, out in the commercial world, are you somebody that will fit in with the values of the organization who are hiring for the role? And then, you know, apart from then what the purpose is, well, really, what is a CV? So your CV is your first introduction to a potential employer. It is your own personal sales and marketing document. It's a way to highlight your academic qualifications, your skills, and whatever work experience that you have. And it's the first step to getting an interview. And more applicants are weeded out at this stage than at any other time during the selection process. So a CV, I mean, it's the first introduction to a potential employer. So you've got to remember, you know, at this point, their introduction to you is really those 2 pages of your CV. And depending on whether they feel you meet the criteria or not, as to whether they're going to meet you in person, that is what they make a decision on based on what they see on your CV. A CV is part of a recruitment process. It's at the very beginning. And this is the point where, as I've said on this slide, is that there are more people weeded out at this stage than at any other time during a selection process. So that's why it's so important that your CV is as competitive as you can make it. So if we think, well, what is the perfect applicant? So this is a pharmacist, but this is across the board. It can be medicine, pharmacist, physio. It can be anything really, to be perfectly honest. So what they want to see is okay, does this person, first of all, meet their need? Does this person fulfill the requirement that they have for this particular role? Do they have the drive and the motivation? Do they have work experience? Depending on the role will depend on the level of work experience that they're looking for. So sometimes, as students, we don't have a huge amount of work experience. So we may not have a huge amount of that to offer. So we have to look outside of our work experience to try and pull some other experiences that we have to make our CV more rounded. You have transferable skills. And we'll talk a little bit about that further on, but transferable skills are your skills like your communication skills, perhaps your teamwork skills, your problem solving skills, different skills that you may have learned throughout your time in RCSI that you can use in different situations, so you can transfer them from one to another. Your academic achievements. So that's very black and white. Either you have the relevant qualification or you don't. And then, do you understand the role and the organization? So have you done your research? Do you know what it is that they are looking for in this role? Do you understand the organization? Do you know what their requirements are? Do you know what their values are? Do you perhaps know where that organization is looking to go in the next 5 years? So really what they want to see there is, have you done some further research? So, well, what does your CV say about you? And what we all want from our CVs, we want it to say to a prospective employer that you can do the job. I can do the job. I have the skills, I have the abilities, and I have the knowledge that are going to be required to do this job. So when we're pulling our CV together, often, it can be for a specific role. So we use what's called a matching approach. So that means you're looking at one hand, you're looking at the job description, or it could be a placement that you're pulling a CV together for. Whatever it is, you're reading and you're looking at, well, what is it that they're looking for? And then you're saying, okay, so do I match? Do I have what they're looking for? Often, we may not have 100% of what they're looking for, but we might have 95%, and that's okay. That will work. But you're kind of looking at, okay, how do I match up to what it is that they're looking for? So what is the employer looking for? So they're looking for the qualifications, they're looking for experience, they're looking for knowledge. What knowledge do you have? And then those transferable skills and competencies. And how do you match up? And that's evidence-based. So it's, yes, I have the qualification. Yes, I have the experience. Yes, I have the knowledge. And, I have 95% of the skills, but I think I can perhaps make them up, or I can pull skills from somewhere else. And then reading between the lines, what is it that this employer really wants? So often, you may have a job spec, and it can be very black and white. But reading between the lines is about, getting online and perhaps doing a little bit of research about the organization, understanding, well, what are their values? Do I match up to what their values are? Do those values match to what my values are? I suppose the other thing, would be networking. So do you know somebody else who works in that organization? Can you have a conversation with that person to find out, well, what's the reason for this vacancy? Has somebody left? Has somebody been promoted? Or is there a very high turnover in that organization, which perhaps might indicate, that they've had difficulty filling this role. So it's just about informing yourself as best you can outside of the actual job spec. So then coming to marketing yourself on paper. So first of all, I'm sure you've heard this lots and lots of times, and you're going to keep hearing it. It's about first impressions, and first impressions really do count. And remember, your CV is the first impression. So it needs to be a really strong, you want to create a very strong first impression. Practical advice is don't make assumptions and spell it out. So sometimes when we're pulling a CV together and we kind of assume that somebody's going to know, maybe, I don't know, maybe we might assume that they might know what PSI means, Pharmaceutical Society of Ireland, but don't assume that they do. So spell it out. Do the recruiter's work for them. And what I mean by that is look at your CV through the lens of a recruiter. So if you were recruiting for this role, what would you want to see on the CV? A statement of fact is not boastful or arrogant. So that means, if you're stating that, let's say your academic achievements are really high, that's a fact. You can back it up by your results. It's not being boastful. Again, put yourself in the recruiter's shoes and accentuate the positive. So throughout your whole CV, it's about being positive. It's about constructing a very positive narrative, using positive language. It needs to be positive. So that's what I mean by accentuate the positive throughout. The characteristics of a good CV. So this is basic, but it's something that we can all forget about from time to time. So the characteristics are that it has a really good structure and it's presented the best that you can possibly make it, that it's tailored. And by tailored, I mean it's specific to what you are applying for. So that shows, you've researched the job spec, you've researched the company, and you have tailored this document to be very specific to that. The CV is complete, but it's concise, it's factual, it's positive. You're using the paper really well. And what I mean by that is, your CV needs to be 2 pages at this stage of your career and no more. So the good use of your white space might mean that your margins are very wide, that the margins at the top and the bottom of the page are small, because you need to you're going to have a lot of information to fit into those 2 pages, and always submit your CV in a PDF format. So this is the basics, and this again, this is, I suppose this is very specific to Ireland, to be honest. And this is from the Employment Equality Act in 1998. So for your placements here, or if you are, furthering your career here in Ireland after CSI, there are certain criteria that does not ever need to go on your CV. And this is your age, your gender, your race, your religion, your sexual orientation, your family or your marital status, if you have a disability, and if you are a member of an ethnic minority. So any of those titles, none of them ever need to go on your CV. And these then are, these are sort of, it's up to you whether you include these or not. I'll talk through them, and I suppose in my experience, I'll share what I think, but it's up to you whether you decide to put these onto your CV or not. So title of the whole document, curriculum vitae. So I would say, no, you do not need to put that on. Everybody knows that if this is a CV, a curriculum vitae. A reason for leaving a previous role. No, that should not really be on a CV. That is usually for an interview stage, if that's an appropriate question and if you're at that stage in your career. Salary, no, that does not ever go on your CV. Abbreviations, I suppose that comes back to what I said is, assumptions. Assume that people don't know what something means. But sometimes what you'll find throughout your CV is you might find you're repeating the same thing. So it would be much easier if you were to abbreviate. So what I would suggest there is the first time you're talking about something, spell it out, and then after that you can abbreviate it. Jargon, I suppose by that I mean any, it's like exaggerations. It's don't over exaggerate. Don't try and fill your CV with fluff. Keep it factual. Charts and graphs, usually they're not appropriate for a CV. Photograph, no, not in Ireland. However, I know there are some other countries, particularly in Europe, where they do like to see a photograph, but for Ireland, no. Your health, you don't need to talk about your health, or anything like that. You never any weaknesses, because you're trying to keep the CV positive, and you don't need a signature, you don't need to sign your CV. This, what I have here is sort of use strong, clear action verbs. And this comes back to sort of keeping your CV positive. You need to use positive words, positive sentences, construct it positively. So you can see there are words like achieved, you know, that you supervised, you created, you collaborated, you demonstrated. So these are just an example. This slide is an example of words to help you to construct sentences, to describe certain situations or experiences. We'll go on in a moment and talk about your personal profile. And these are the types of words that are very useful to use when you're constructing that profile. But they're very helpful, these words. They can help you construct, you know, strong sentences. And then formatting. So I have here sort of, it's back to basics, because sometimes I think we kind of take it for granted that people, you know, might use a certain font or a size of font, or to make sure that the spelling is okay. So I'm bringing it right back to basics here, and forgive me if this is something that you all would already do. So the font size needs to be 11 or 12. And I have be consistent there. So if you decide your font and your CV is going to be 11, make sure it's 11 throughout your whole CV. Don't jump from one to the other. What I would say, depending on how much your experience you have to put on your CV, you may need to reduce it to 10. That will depend on what stage you're at in your career and how much you have to put on your CV. Ideally, I suppose probably 11, I would say, is probably the optimum font. It needs to be two to 3 pages, but at this stage of your careers, I would say 2 pages and no more. Do not put your contact details in the header. The reason we would advise that you don't do that is often organizations use what's called an applicant tracking system. And that is where basically all of the CVs go into the applicant tracking system. And if there is something in the header, the system doesn't even read the CV. So it means your CV is not even pulled out of the pile of CVs. Even though you might have all of the right criteria, because you've made that one mistake and the system can't read your CV, you're out of the pile altogether. So do not put anything in the header. Avoid funny fonts. And what I mean by that is just use a very plain, readable, simple, professional font. Times New Roman or Garamond, they're very readable fonts. There's another font that's very strong that I must put on that slide called Calibri, and that's another very strong font. So just something very simple. Use abbreviations with caution. We've already spoken about that. Consistency, spacing, indentation, etc. So that is, if you know, depending on what way you're going to lay it out, if you're going to have a space between a title and perhaps a bullet point, well, then just make sure you're be consistent throughout the whole document, that's how it is and how it's formatted. If you're going to use bullet points, make sure you use bullet points throughout. Make sure they're the same size. Avoid large blocks of text. Sometimes that can be very difficult to do because you might have a lot of information to condense into a paragraph. But the reason that we say to avoid large blocks of text is really from a visual point of view. So, you know, again, if you put yourself in the recruiter's shoes and say they might have 50 CVs to read through, the more visually attractive your CV is, the easier you're going to make the role for that recruiter. So again, avoid large blocks of text. Bold for emphasis, but don't overdo it. So that's, you know, bold. If you're going to decide you're going to bold your headings, we'll leave it at that. Don't bold paragraphs or anything like that. And then again, just it needs to be in PDF format, unless they ask for a different format. But usually the professional expectation would be that you would submit your CV in a PDF format. So there are a couple of different CV structures, but you are all going to use what's called a chronological format. As you can see, there's skills-based, functional, and there's a resume for the US and Canada, but your CV is going to be a chronological CV. And an example of a format for a chronological CV is here. Now, these titles that are on this screen, these are the titles that you are all going to have on your CV, and you're then going to populate each of these titles with the relevant information. So your personal details, a personal profile, education, your employment history. And in that employment history, you put in your clinical experience, you can put in your placement experience, you can put in any other work experience. You know, you may have experience from when you were back at home, you may have done some babysitting, you might have, I don't know, you know, you may have something that you might feel, is it relative or not? And usually the answer is yes, it's important to get any experience that you have on your CV. Any extracurricular activities. So that, and I kind of pull this in with volunteering as well. So, you know, let me see, you might have done some volunteering work with RCSI, you might have done some tutoring work, you might have been on the welcome committee for new students coming into RCSI, even being part of the society, the Kuwait Medical Society here. That's kind of extracurricular activities. You know, if you've done any activity at all, that goes onto the CV. Any achievements and interests that you have, any conferences or presentations that you may have delivered, any extra certificates outside of sort of your regular studies. Extra certificates might be something like, I know with the pharmacy students this week, we were speaking about a mental health awareness certificate that all of the third years achieved this year. So that's something that will go on. You may have a certificate, let me think, it could be, you know, if you've worked in, say you worked in a restaurant, you may have what's a HACCP certificate that can go on here too. And then references. Now we'll go through each of these titles in a little bit more detail as we go along. And that is just, I wanted to put this on just to give you an overview of what a sample CV might look like. Now I know it's probably difficult for you to read here, so don't worry, I can give you all access to the CV, but just so you can have a look and see, okay, so that's what it looks like over 2 pages. So you can see all of the titles we've spoken about are here, your personal profile, education qualifications and achievements, placement history, employment history. This person has research experience in publications, volunteering, everything is on there, and they've got it onto the 2 pages. So again, that's an overview of what it will visually look like, but you will all get access to a copy of this CV, so don't worry too much about that. So if we come down to, okay, go through some of these headings. So on the personal details, so you can see on this CV, this person has given their name, they've given their home address, but they've also given their term address, and they have their telephone number and their email. So you can choose, you know, you can choose either to, you can choose to lay it out like this. So you can include your home address and your term address. You know, I suppose the question would be, well, why would you leave one off? And my answer to that would be, it depends on what you're applying for. So if you're applying for a placement here in Ireland, I suppose for an example, the pharmacy students applying for placements here in Ireland, then really what's practical and applicable and most appropriate is the term address. So I would definitely leave the term address on there. Whether you want to include your home address, that's really individual. What I would say about the telephone, it's usually a mobile number. And even I have the title, telephone there, and email. You actually don't even need to put those words there because it's sort of self-explanatory what they are, isn't it? That it's your mobile number or your email. But with your mobile, what I would say is whatever mobile number you're going to put on here, make sure it's a mobile number that you use regularly and that you have an appropriate voicemail set up on it. And don't forget to check your voicemails. And the same with your email. Probably best to use your RCSI email address because that's the one that you're using all the time, and it's a professional email address. So that's really all that's needed on the personal details. The personal profile. So a personal profile is an introduction to yourself on your CV. So it's usually sort of 3 to 4, so anywhere between 3 and 5 lines is fine, to be perfectly honest. This can be difficult to get it right. It is a summary of it's a summary of you, so your education, your skills, your personality, and sort of a general idea of what your career goal is, or what is it that you're really hoping to achieve. This is an opportunity for you to promote yourself. Now, I would call it tasteful self-promotion because you don't want to be, it doesn't need to be aggressive. It doesn't need to be overly confident, but yet you need to be able to, you have to promote yourself here. So it's not the time for you to hold back and maybe, you know, say, oh, I better not write that about myself. That might sound too boastful. It's okay. This is okay here. So long as it's factual, it's not boasting. So this is an example of a personal profile here. And this again, this is a pharmacy student. So a third year Master of Pharmacy student at the Royal College of Surgeons, Ireland, currently tracking a 2-1. Excellent academic capabilities and consistently demonstrates excellent communication and interpersonal skills, proactive solutions focused approach to projects, and motivated by achieving excellence. And this person is telling us that they're seeking a hospital pharmacist placement that will enhance my whatever, my ability as a pharmacy, it might be, or something like that. But you can see from that personal profile, it's very, it's positive. It's not boastful, but this person is confident. They know themselves well, they understand themselves well, and they're not afraid to tell us about that. So you can see it there by those positive, strong action words that we're using. So this is a very good personal profile, and it's something I would urge you to perhaps read through and maybe tailor it to be to yourself. Use it for your own personal profile, but obviously change it depending on where you're at and what you're applying to. Now again, tailor is the word that I would use here. So if it's a thing, you know, this person has put seeking a hospital pharmacist placement. If it's a thing that you're sending in a CV for multiple placements, not just in a hospital setting, or for medical students, if you're applying for an elective and, you know, okay, you may have a preference for a certain speciality, but really you need to get an elective and you're happy to take whatever you can get. You would take that out, and you wouldn't be as specific as a hospital pharmacist. You might say seeking a pharmacy placement. So it's much more broad in general. So tailor it depending on what it is you're applying for. So the next title then on your CV will be education. And again, this is in reverse chronological order. So you're going to have your most recent first. You're going to lay it out with your dates on the left, the program or the institution or the university. So RCSI would be next. And you can decide to include your grades or not. Again, this is sort of, it's up to you whether you feel comfortable with that. You know, if your grades are, if you're not confident in your grades or you're not happy where they are, then don't put your grades on it. If you're delighted with your grades and you're flying and you're doing brilliantly, then you can put your grades on. Depending again on how much you have to put in your CV. So if you're somebody who's at a very early stage in their career and you really don't have very much work experience, but you need to fill out the 2 pages of your CV, you can put some modules. So you can put some relevant modules onto your CV, and you would put them here in the education. Or if there's any projects or dissertations that are very relevant to what it is you're applying for, you would put them in here. So, and then often a question that I get asked is, how far back in my education do I go? So I would say you go back to your high school, and probably not required to go back any further than that. But some people may have another undergraduate degree, they may have other qualifications. So you can put all of those in here under your education. And that's just an example of a layout of how to lay out, I suppose, your education. So you can see this person here, 2015, 2020, they're a Master of Pharmacy, expecting a 2-1, and they were awarded a practice distinction, the Best Student Award here. And then this is their Leaving Cert. So this was a student who did their Leaving Cert in Ireland, so equivalent of their high school. And they've also put in the subjects that they did there because they're very relevant to pharmacy, I guess, and also they're very, you know, academically, they achieved really highly in those subjects. So you can choose to put those in there if you wish. Your work experience, again, that's going to be reversed chronological order. So that's the most recent first. And what you would include here is the title of the job, the name, the location, and a very brief description of the employer, and the from and the to dates on the left-hand side, concise description of the responsibilities, so bullet point those responsibilities. And usually you might have, depending on how long you were there, you know, you might have maybe 4 to 5 bullet points. And then key achievements. So if there are any key achievements, you know, where there were tangible results from you being there in that work experience, you can put them there. The work experience categories, again, like we spoke previously, they can be clinical experience, it can be teaching experience, research, other work experience, extracurricular activities, and any volunteering that you might have. You can also include your placement experience here. You know, you're going to, depending again on what stage you're at, you might have your second year placement going on, you'll have your fourth year placement. And then for medical students, you can include your clinical rotations here as well. So healthcare experience, of course, for all of you, this is going to be the most relevant and important section. So again, it's in chronological order, you're stating the type of placement and where it was and the experience that you gained. Include any aspects of the placement that made your experience unique. And by that, I mean, you know, you've got to remember this is going to be a competitive process. So is there anything that happened that maybe will make you stand out from somebody else? If appropriate, list the patient types that you've treated, and include your level of independence versus assisting or observing. Include your clinical marks. Yeah, again, if you're very happy with those and you feel they're competitive, you can put them in there. Your second and your first year placements at this stage, or, you know, as you go on in your career, they're going to be very brief because the more relevant information will have longer lines attached to them than your second and your first year placements. And you don't need to include the names of your supervisors or anything like that. So the next piece is, you know, to ask you to be specific in your CV. So avoid generic process descriptions. Describe your role accurately and fully. Numbers and details, they do add real power to a CV. Those numbers and details, again, it could be like a percentage. It might be, you know, if you were in a situation where perhaps you increased, I don't know, customer service from 80% to 90%, that might be something like that. And then, you know, by being specific about talking about a team. So were you part of a team? So, you know, did you lead the team or were you a team member? You know, in your interests, you say you enjoy tennis. So are you in a club? Have you ever won anything? Do you compete? Do you compete regularly? If you spent 3 months writing news articles in your sort of, that might be something you might put in your interests. That's wonderful, but be more specific. So how many articles did you write? Did you publish any? Is this something that you're still doing? Just again, you know, be specific. So think, what do they want? So what does an employer want? And where is my evidence? So they might want a relevant degree, experience, and whether they need somebody with language skills or not. Ask, you know, communication and personal skills. We feel we need somebody with very strong abilities in communication and dealing with people. Creative problem solving, influencing skills, people leadership, identifying somebody who can identify and implement innovative solutions, somebody who's flexible, some perhaps commercial, or maybe somebody who's used to dealing with technological challenges. I think we're all used to that at this stage, trying to navigate Zoom and Microsoft Teams. So then skills profile, and this is around skills and transferable skills. So, you know, you need to highlight your transferable and your technical skills. Again, coming back to, you know, the strong, clear, concise language. You're going to tailor these skills depending on what it is you're applying to, and you do need supporting evidence. So an example of the supporting evidence might be, you know, you might say in your transferable skills section on your CV that I have great communication skills. So I suppose we can all say that, can't we? But the next sentence you'll see kind of, it just broadens that sentence out. So rather than saying I have great communication skills, you could phrase that something like a confident presenter with experience of speaking in front of a range of audiences, including new entrants to college, classmates, and senior consultants. So that's telling whoever is reading your CV that you are somebody who is used to standing up and speaking to groups of people of all ranges, whether that's young students coming into the college or consultants that you're meeting on your rounds, to working together with classmates. So it just broadens out the communication skills piece. And also, you know, you've got to remember, if you're thinking a couple of steps ahead in a hiring process, this could give something for you to talk about at an interview, because somebody might read that on your CV and they'll say, oh, you say here that you're a confident presenter. Tell us about some of the presentations that you've made. So just to be aware of that also. So again, another example of that is a team player, or you can say contributed successfully as a team member and engaged effectively with colleagues in academic, voluntary and professional contexts. So that's just telling, again, whoever's reading your CV, you know, that you're used to working in teams and you're used to working in teams of all levels and abilities, and that you're comfortable there, you like it, and you're a contributor. So you're somebody who can give of your time and your skills and your knowledge. So it's just, I suppose, trying to encourage you to think about fleshing out sentences and how you describe some of your skills. So the achievements and interests, don't neglect this section. And the reason that we say don't neglect this section, often, you know, some of the things I've heard from hiring managers are, they might say, look, I've got 40 CVs here in front of me. Everybody who's applied has a master's in pharmacy. Everybody who's applied has done a 4th year placement in a pharmacy setting. So then where is the differences? And often they will come down to interests and achievements, and they might look at it and say, okay, this person has been involved in the Kuwait Medical Science Students Association. So it means that they're used to speaking with other people. They're used to introducing themselves to other people. Perhaps they're used to contributing to events. So it means that this person is a team player. They like meeting and networking with other people. So that interest is very important, because it can bring a little bit more of your personality than perhaps other areas of your CV. So again, like all of the other sections, you need to keep this area concise and relevant. Avoid generalizations like walking the dog or meeting new people. And, you know, if it is a thing that you were awarded a scholarship to RCSI, sing about that, shout about it, have it on your CV. I was, you know, awarded a competitive national scholarship to RCSI. That's something to be extremely proud of. So it's important that that goes there on your CV. References, again, you don't always have to include references. Usually I would recommend people that you would just put references available on request. But sometimes, depending on what it is you're applying for, they will ask you, they will say you need to include 2 referees. And what I would say here, before you put anybody's name or contact details on your CV, you must get their permission to do so. So from a GDPR perspective and a professional perspective, you must ask your referee for their permission to use their details. And you also need to tell them what it is you're applying for, so that if they are called to give you a reference, that they're very comfortable doing so, and that they know what you've applied for, so they can tailor their reference to that application also. So just here you can see the 2 different layouts. So it can either be references available on request or listing referees here. And again, depending on what you're applying for and depending at the stage of your career, you know, at this stage, it will probably be 2 academic references that you will be asked to give, and they would be the people who you would have on your CV. And usually they might be the head of the school that you're in, or one of your lecturers, or something like that. So then what do hiring managers hate? So they hate spelling mistakes and typos. They hate cliches, any texting lingo, and they hate a busy format. They do not like to see a one size fits all. And that comes back to the tailoring piece. So you must tailor your CV and any information that is not relevant. So if it's not specific and relevant to what it is they are hiring, it's just annoying for them. So again, I feel this is basic, but look, I guess I've been caught out with this as well. We all have been, just with spell check. It cannot correct everything. So, what I would urge you to do is get somebody to read through your CV, engage with us in the careers team in RCSI. We can help you pull it together. Or you know what, you might pull your CV together and you're very confident doing that, but you might email it on to me and say, Niamh, will you have a quick read through this just to make sure there's no spelling mistakes or errors anywhere? Because as you can see, with spell check, sometimes it misses certain things for us. So just make sure that you get somebody else to read through it for you, maybe twice or 3 times. So does your cover letter matter? And yes, the answer to that is yes, of course it does. The cover letter, again, depending on how it's laid out and how it's structured and the language in it, again, it's going to tell whoever's reading that, are you somebody who's professional? Have you researched this role? Have you sat down and thought about why it is you're applying for it? And have you sat down and thought about what makes you the perfect person for it? So what you want to do with the cover letter is you want to grab the reader's attention. So that means you've got to cover the basics, about, well, I'm applying for this role because why? Is it a placement? Is it something you've always been interested in? So you've got to grab their attention. The letter needs to be clear and concise. Again, the spelling errors and grammar, be careful about that. The information needs to be relevant, it needs to be targeted, and usually no more than 1 page. So it's always in a business or professional layout and structure. And you always start it with dear Dr., Miss, Professor. Tell them what you have. What is it that you have that makes you competitive for this? And what is it? Why is that you're applying to them? Why do you want to work with them? What is it about the role that makes you interested and curious about it? And then the other information, that's only if it's necessary. And then your cover letter, you would always sign it off. It'll always be yours sincerely, and then your full name there as well. So the key to an effective an overall application is that you have done the research, that you're going the extra mile, that you're networking a little bit, and you're speaking to people maybe who've already been there, who are working there already, that they might be able to give you some inside information. 4 eyes on everything, and that comes back to get your friends to read through it, get again somebody in the careers team to look at it for you or help you with it. Just reread it again and tailor your CV and your cover letter. So do not keep it generic. It is very specific to whatever it is that you're applying for. Yes, so I think that's it from me. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to cover. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to ask. If you want to ask outside of this, my email address is on the first slide, and I am going to share these slides with Gemma. So I think she's going to put them up on the website. You'll have them, but my email address is niamhmullen@rcsi.ie. Please feel free to email me at any stage. Be very happy to meet with you on a one-to-one, or we can just have a Microsoft Teams conversation. You might already have a CV done and you just need a little bit of tweaking. Very happy to help and support you with any of that. You're very welcome, Nora and Rawa. It's been lovely. It's been really lovely to be here. It's just, I wish we were in person. It's so difficult to do this on a screen. It'd be much nicer if we were all in person. So hopefully at some stage in the future, we will get to do this in person. But Gemma, if there's anything else you need from me, just let me know.
Just to double check, does anyone have a question before we end? Okay, so it doesn't seem like anyone has a question. So before we end, I'd like to thank you on behalf of ChemSafe for making this workshop possible. It was really helpful and informative. So thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome.